Welcome to our Bible study this morning. And this morning I've entitled our lesson, How to Pray. And I am not teaching in a series right now. I just thought I wanted to, or I feel like the Lord led me, just to share some of the lessons that He's taught me along the way with you. And so this morning I've entitled the lesson, How Should I Pray? And I found some wonderful answers in Nehemiah chapter 1 and 2. I'll give you just a minute to find Nehemiah because it is after Ezra. It is not a book of prophecy. It's a book of history. So it's not over with the prophets at the end of the Old Testament. It is before Psalms. But the book following it, the one just before it is Ezra, Nehemiah, and then Esther. But if you're looking for where they're at, they're all before the Psalms. So it's a little book that, unless you know that it's part of history and not part of prophecy, it can be a little bit hard to find. But I found some wonderful information from Brother Nehemiah on prayer. You know, many years ago, I read a book on prayer. In fact, I read a lot of books on prayer, and I don't even know which one it was that I read, because it's probably been 25 years ago anyway. But it's in this book, whoever wrote it said you should pray at the same time every day, pick a time that's convenient for you, and pray in the same place, so that that place, whether it's down by your chair or down by your bed or wherever it is, it kind of becomes your altar. And so I started doing that, and as some of you that know me pretty well, I can tend sometimes to be a little bit of an overachiever. So I thought, well, you know, I should just at least pray an hour a day. So I took what they said in the book, and I took what I added to it that they didn't say in the book, and I began to do that. I prayed same time, same place, an hour a day. Well, when I put that restriction on myself to pray an hour a day, I was praying with this eye shut and that one on the clock. You know how that goes? So, you know, you got an hour. And sometimes I would finish and it'd be 10 more minutes. And I'd say, Lord, I'll just sing you a song, you know, because I've prayed about everything that I knew to pray about. And one day I remember just saying to the Lord, Lord, are you as bored with this as I am? Because I'm bored. I'm praying the same thing because an hour gives me time to pray for almost everybody I know in every situation that they're in, which is a good thing, but it became very repetitive and, well, I don't know if he was bored with it or not as much as I was. And listen, I want to tell you this, though, that I did have some good time with the Lord during that time. But it just wasn't for me. And I'm sure that some people that works for. You know, Daniel said he prayed 3 times a day. And so having those set times and praying at certain times, and obviously that worked for her. But folks, I found it didn't work for me because I had a hard time staying focused that long. But I mean, I did that to myself, though. So I've got nobody that wasn't the book's fault. That was just me thinking, well, if I'm going to do all that and make it worthwhile, and so I should at least pray an hour a day. And so I do think people should pray an hour a day. I'm just not sure it needs to be a consecutive hour, you know. So anyway, I learned some great lessons from Nehemiah, and I want to share those with you today. Now, Nehemiah was an Israelite slave, and he had become the cupbearer to the king of Persia. They were taken into captivity by Babylon, and then and then Persia overtook Babylon. So Nehemiah ended up being the king of Persia. And they were what's that word? Where they control the whole known world at the time. I need Bobby here. Okay, well, anyway, you know what I mean? It'll come to me in a minute. When it does, I'll share it with you. But they were the strongest power in the world at that time. And so it made the king of Persia the most powerful man in the world, in the known world at that time. Okay, so let's go to the scripture and find out now. A small group of people, of Israelites, have been allowed to go back to Israel. That's where we're at. Now, Nehemiah is still in Persia, but a small group of Israelites have gone back, have been allowed to go back to Jerusalem. Okay, so these are the memoirs of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. In late autumn, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year of King Xerxes' reign, who is the most powerful man in the world, he said, I was at the fortress of Susa, which was this leader's winter home. And he said, one of his brothers came to visit me with some other men who had just arrived from Judah, and I asked him about the Jews who had returned there from captivity and about how things were going in Jerusalem. He would naturally want to know. They said to me, things are not going well. This is what Nehemiah said. They said to him, things are not going well for those who return to the province of Judah. They are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. Verse number 4, very important verse. Nehemiah said, when I heard this, I sat down and wept. In fact, for days I mourned, fasted, and prayed to the God of heaven. Then I said, and here's his prayer, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of unfailing love with those who love him and obey his commands. Listen to my prayer, look down and see me praying night and day for your people Israel. He started his prayer with talking about who God is. Now he's going to talk about, in his prayer, he's going to talk about who he is. He said, I confess that we have sinned against you. Yes, even my own family and I have sinned. We have sinned terribly by not obeying the commands, decrees, and regulations that you gave us through your servant Moses. Please remember, still praying, what you told your servant Moses. Empire, world empires. That's what it was. Isn't that odd when things come to you, when you quit thinking about them? Okay, please remember what you told your servant Moses. Verse 8. If you are unfaithful to me, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands and live by them, then even if you are exiled to the ends of the earth, I'll bring you back and to the place I have chosen for my name to be honored. He reminded God, this is what you told Moses, your servants. Oh Lord, put it in his heart to be kind to me. He's praying for, he knows he's going to go in before the king, and he's asking the Lord, grant me success today by making the king favorable to me. Chapter 2 says, early the following spring, in the month of Nisan, during the 20th year of King Artaxerxes' reign, I was serving the king his wine. That was his job. I had never before appeared sad in his presence, and there was a reason for that, because it was forbidden. It was forbidden for any of the slaves or workers to go into the king's presence and be sad. Couldn't do it. And the penalty could be death. So he said, I'd never appeared in his presence sad before. So the king asked me, why are you looking so sad? You don't look sick to me. You must be deeply troubled. Then I was terrified. Why? Because he was thinking, I not only came into the king's presence sad, which is punishable by death, he recognizes it. He sees that I'm sad. So this thing could go either way. But remember the prayer he prayed? Lord, please make the king favorable toward me? He said, I was terrified, but I replied, long live the king. How can I not be sad? For the city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. The king asked, well, how can I help you? That was a relief, wasn't it? It was a relief to him, and it was also what? Answer to his prayer. And then it said the king asked, well, how can I help you? And look at this little phrase in here. Verse number 5 says, I replied. But there's a little phrase in there before he replied. And it said, with a prayer to the God of heaven. So when the king said, how can I help you? Nehemiah prayed. Couldn't have been a long prayer, had to have been short, because he needs to answer the king's question. But he brought it before the Lord. He prayed before he spoke. Then verse number 5 says, I replied, if it please the king, and if you are pleased with me, your servant, send me to Judah to build a city where my ancestors are buried. And he asked him how long he would be gone, and the king agreed to his request. So after the king said, yeah, you can go, verse 7, he said, I also asked the king, if it please the king, let me have letters addressed to governors, instructing them to let me travel safely. Give me a letter to Asaph, the manager of the king's forest, instructing him to give me lumber. I need it to make beams for the gates of the temple fortress, for the city walls, and for a house for myself. And the king granted these requests because the gracious hand of God was on me, Nehemiah said. It wasn't because the king was gracious. It was because God was gracious. And he answered Nehemiah's prayer and made the king favorable toward him. In chapter 2, verse 12, he tells us at the end of that verse, I had not told anyone about the plans God had put in my heart for Jerusalem. Then he went out at night and did an inspection to see what kind of shape the walls were in. 16 says the city officials did not know I'd been out there or what I was doing, for I had not yet said anything to anyone about my plans. I had not yet spoken to the Jewish leaders, the priests, the nobles, the officials, or anyone else in administration. But now I said to them, you know very well what trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire. Let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem and end this disgrace. Verse 18, then I told them about how the gracious hand of God had been on me and about my conversation with the king. So they replied at once, okay, let's build the wall. Verse 20 says, the God of heaven will help us succeed. And my friends, I want to tell you something spectacular, something that only God could do. They finished that wall in 52 days. I don't know that with all of our modern technology we could do that. They completed repairing that wall in 52 days. Only God could do that. Well, I want to just go through and pick out some verses now and show you some things about prayer. Verse number 4. When he heard the news, he prayed. Before he went to social media, he prayed. When he heard the news, he prayed. There's a key for us there. We're trying to learn, how should I pray? What's going to make a difference in my prayer life that it's no longer a duty, but something that I desire to do. Not something that I just know I should do or something that I even tell myself I have to do, but something I want to do. How do we change from prayer being a duty to it being an absolute joy. That is what we're going to learn this morning. And my friend, when you leave here, you'll know how. Because it makes a difference when the Lord teaches. But when he heard the news, he prayed. And folks, when you hear certain news, the first thing we need to do is prayer. We need to go to God before we go to anybody else. You know what? If there's something that concerns you and me, if I pray about it first, what I say to you may be different than what I would say to you if I hadn't prayed about it. So our first step, when you hear the news, see, when I had my hour set aside, and when I knew when my hour was, when I would hear news, I would just push it forward to my hour. When I knew I'd be praying, I'd pray about it when it got to my prayer time. But oh, my friend, that's not nearly as joyful as when you hear the news, pray. You know, when you're watching something on TV, when you get an Amber Alert, or when a friend shares a burden with you, pray right then. Nehemiah admitted he was part of the problem. And sometimes you and I just need to say, Lord, I messed up. I know it. I didn't follow your commandments. I had a bad attitude. I did something I shouldn't have done. I said something I shouldn't have done. Nehemiah admitted he was part of the problem. And listen, if it's a situation where you or I, if I'm part of the problem, then I need to say, Lord, I'm part of the problem, but I know you can fix it anyway. I know I brought it on myself. I know I caused it. But I know that doesn't make any difference to your great ability to fix it. I know that you can fix any mess that I make. And that God can help us not to make so many messes sometimes. But folks, I want to tell you something. Sometimes we're just going to mess up. We're going to say something we shouldn't say. We're going to do something we shouldn't do. And we should be like Nehemiah. Lord, I'm part of the problem. Or I am the problem. And admit it. Just admit it. The devil didn't make you do it. Somebody else didn't make you do it. I didn't do it because of what somebody... No, I did it, Lord, because I was in disobedience to you. And that's the bottom line. And I'm responsible for what I do and say. And I'm sorry. God came right in, didn't he? It's okay. We all cause problems. But see, God, he didn't say, well, Nehemiah, too bad for you, son. No, he honored his prayer. And sometimes we just need to admit that we're part of the problem. Verse number 11, he prayed specifically, please grant me success in making the king favorable to me. Please, very specific. Make me a success. How? By making the king favorable toward me. Because the king's going to make or break his deal. In chapter 2 and verse 4, he prayed before he spoke. Remember? When the king said, what can I do for you? And he said, with a prayer to God of heaven, then I replied. So when somebody... when you're in a conversation with somebody, sometimes you just need a really quick prayer before you answer. We just need to bring it to God before we answer, before we reply. We just need to. And folks, sometimes my prayer is, Lord, put your words in my mouth. Don't let me reply out of this deceitful heart of mine. Because the heart is wicked above all things. Who can know it? You don't know your heart, and I don't know mine, because the Bible tells us we don't. So don't let me answer out of this. But Father, put your words in my mouth so that it will be sweet, and it'll be kind, and it'll be gentle, just like Jesus. Because he's all of those things. He gave God the glory in verse 8. He said, and the king granted these requests because the gracious hand of God was on me. So he gave God the glory. Verse 11, his conversation at this point had been with God alone. Remember when he said, I hadn't told anybody. The only one he had been discussing with or having any conversation about what he was going to do was between him and God. And then after the survey, when the time was right, he shared it with the people around him. And verse number 20, he said, the God of heaven will help us succeed. Did you hear what he told those people? The God of heaven will help us succeed. How many times, folks, when people are telling us about their problems and we have an opportunity to point them toward Jesus, and we don't do it? We've got to have our spiritual eyes open to see those opportunities that we have to point people to Jesus. I don't know about you, but sometimes I give them my opinion, then all of a sudden it dawns on me. My opinion's not very helpful to them, but if I would point them to Jesus, he's the one that can really help them, and the Lord will help me to back up and go at it from the right angle. So whenever you feel that, when you're sharing with somebody and you just feel the Holy Spirit, need to point them to me, just back up and point them to Jesus, because he's the one that can help them. Okay, so this absolutely changed my prayer life, and I'll share with you how. I learned to pray throughout the day as things happened or as they come to mind. If you read on social media or somebody calls you and they have a problem, that is the time to pray. That's the time to take it to the Lord. See, folks, what we need is to pray without ceasing. Well, we've got a lot of things to do. We can't be down on our knees all day, every day. But we can be in such an attitude of prayer to the Lord that when we hear of somebody's problems, we immediately pray. When somebody gives a prayer request in here, we immediately pray. When we need an open-ended conversation with Jesus all day, every day. Now, that was hard for me at first when I studied that and realized that's what I needed, because I was not used to it. Because remember, I was used to praying an hour a day. So I wasn't used to just talking to Jesus all day long. So here's how I started to help myself get in that groove was I started, and I've shared this, I think, with you before, but I just started saying, "Good morning, Lord," when I'd wake up in the morning. I say my Father, but I say, "Good morning, my Father." And then at night, when Doyle and I are ready to go to sleep and our last word is said, the last thing I like to say is, "Good night, my Father." Because it taught me to have that conversation with him going on. Relationship's what it's called. Where, folks, he's with you 24/7. That old thing, I'll take care of the little things, I'll just give God the big things. God wants all the things. I don't want to take time away from whatever he's doing in the world or with other people. God is omnipresent. He's going to take care of all that stuff because that's who he is and that's what he can do. But he is with you and he is with me 24/7. Okay, I can't talk to him about big things 24/7. I've got to have some conversations in there about some small things. When you get together with your friends, and some of it just chit-chat, I think we can chit-chat with the Lord about whatever is going on and whenever it's going on. That relationship. He's with me. Why would I not talk to him? He's with you. Why would you not talk to him? Not just for 24 hours a day or for an hour a day. See, that's 1 hour in 24 hours. That didn't work for me. But a relationship where I can just talk to him throughout the day, boy, it's beautiful. And I look forward to talking to him about things. We need to pray specifically. You know, I went through a time where I said to the Lord, you know what's going to happen already. So I don't even know how to pray for some things. And I've shared this with you, but this is where I arrived. I finally told the Lord, when I pray, I'm going to ask you for what I want. And I'm going to accept what I get. Because I know you will sift through those prayers. See, I'm glad God hasn't given me everything I prayed for. Doyle Lane would be sitting back in that corner if God had given me everything I prayed for before I met him or prayed about. You see how we need to be really glad that God says no a lot of times? Because he knows what's best for me. So when he says no, that's okay. That is absolute. And when he does something different than the way when I prayed, and God does it totally what he usually does, different than what I had in my mind, I sometimes just say, Lord, it's not exactly what I had in mind, but I do recognize it's from you. So I know it's the best. You see, was praying an hour a day a bad thing? No, it was a good thing. But there was a better thing. And sometimes we substitute the good and we don't get to the best. Learn to pray before we speak. Always give God the glory. In a conversation that you've had with God, don't you have some conversations with God that just need to remain private? I don't have very many things I don't share with Doyle, but there's some things I talk to God about that are so, I don't know that I could share them. So that's okay. He's got his stuff too. And you've got your areas, things you talk to the Lord about that either don't feel like you don't need to share or you're not ready to share. That's okay. You can have conversations with just you and the Lord, and sometimes they don't need to be shared. But if it does need to be shared, then God will tell you what to do. So many instances I could just share where God tells us what to do. So the main thing is that we trust God. And when we do these things in our prayer life, we develop a relationship that is exciting. Prayer becomes conversation and not a duty. And you feel you've spent a day with Jesus and not just an hour. So my friend, it's all about relationship. God is with you 24/7. You're never alone. And he always wants conversation with us. And he honors your prayers. It's his will that you pray to him. It's his will that you talk to him. So I hope this helps you just to build a relationship that you know he's always there and that you are never alone and that he will guide you and that he will answer your prayers with the very best answer. Maybe not even the one you're expecting, but the best one, because he knows the beginning from the end and we don't. I want to stroll over heaven with you some glad day when all our troubles and heartaches have truly vanished away. We'll enjoy all the beauty where all things you. I want to stroll over heaven with you. Thank you.